The alien princess pointed to the youngest human warrior and said he will be claimed before the entire galaxy. The Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, and its crystal ceiling showed the endless stars of the galaxy above. Representatives from over 300 species had gathered here today, filling the massive chamber with colors and shapes that no human eye had ever seen before. Earth joined the Galactic Union 15 years ago. This was the annual claiming ceremony, one of the oldest traditions in known space, and Sergeant Yoon Tae-hyun felt completely out of place among his fellow soldiers. He stood at the back of the human delegation, trying to make himself as small as possible, while the 6 veteran warriors in front of him stood tall and proud. Commander Reyes glanced back at him with something like sympathy in her eyes, and Tae-hyun knew exactly what she was thinking. He should not be here at all. Private First Class Morrison had fallen ill just 2 days before departure, and Tae-hyun had been pulled from his training unit as a last-minute replacement because he happened to have the right security clearance. He was only 23 years old, the youngest human soldier to ever attend this ceremony, and he had never seen real combat in his entire military career. The other species looked at the human delegation with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to open contempt, and Tae-hyun understood why they felt this way. Humanity was still the newest member of galactic society, considered primitive and fragile by races that had traveled between stars for thousands of years, before humans learned to make fire. A deep horn sounded through the hall, and every being fell silent as the main doors opened once again. The Etheri delegation entered, and Tae-hyun felt his breath catch in his chest at the sight of them. They were tall and elegant, with skin that shifted colors like oil on water, and eyes that glowed with soft inner light. The Etheri Empire was one of the 3 great powers of the galaxy, ancient beyond human understanding and wealthy beyond human imagination. At the center of their procession walked Princess Valara Kethsani, daughter of the Emperor himself, and she moved with a grace that made every other being in the room seem clumsy by comparison. Her skin shifted through shades of deep purple and silver, and her 4 eyes scanned the assembled delegations with an intensity that made Tae-hyun want to look away. The ceremony began with the lesser houses making their selections first, choosing champions from other species to serve as elite guardians and representatives. One by one, warriors from various races were claimed and led away to begin their new lives of honor and service. The human delegation was passed over again and again, and Tae-hyun saw Commander Reyes clench her jaw tighter with each rejection. This had happened every year since humanity joined the Union, and most humans had stopped expecting anything different. Why would any great house want a human champion when they lived such short lives and broke so easily compared to other species? The final selection belonged to the Etheri, as it had for 3,000 years, and Princess Valara rose from her seat with fluid grace. The hall fell completely silent because the Etheri had never once chosen a human in all their centuries of participation in this ceremony. Princess Valara walked slowly down the center aisle, her glowing eyes moving from delegation to delegation as the representatives held their breath in anticipation. She passed the mighty Croshan warriors without a glance, and she ignored the brilliant Ven scientists who had won Nobel equivalent prizes. She walked past the fearsome Dreth soldiers and the graceful Minari diplomats, and whispers began to spread through the crowd. Where was she going? Tae-hyun felt his heart stop when her eyes locked onto the human delegation, and he saw Commander Reyes stand even straighter with desperate hope. But Princess Valara did not stop at Commander Reyes, and she did not choose any of the veteran warriors at the front. She walked directly toward Tae-hyun, and he felt the weight of every eye in that massive hall pressing down on him. She stopped less than a meter away from him, close enough that he could see the complex patterns swirling in her luminous eyes, and she raised one elegant hand to point directly at his chest. Her voice rang out clear and strong, filling the entire hall with words that would change history forever. "This one," she declared in the ritual tongue that all species understood. "He will be claimed before the entire galaxy." The silence lasted for exactly 3 heartbeats before the hall erupted into chaos. Commander Reyes stepped forward with her face twisted in confusion and concern, speaking rapidly about protocols and mistakes and the need for reconsideration. The other human soldiers stared at Taehyun with expressions of pure shock, and he could hear species throughout the hall laughing at what they saw as a joke or an insult. An ethery elder rushed forward to whisper urgently in the princess's ear, but she waved him away without breaking eye contact with Taehyun. "Your Highness," Commander Reyes said with barely controlled panic, "there must be some error. And this soldier is merely a replacement who was never meant to be considered for." "There is no error," Princess Valara interrupted, and her voice carried the absolute authority of 10,000 years of royal bloodline. "Galactic lore is clear on this matter, and a claim spoken before the assembly cannot be refused or withdrawn." She held out her hand to Taehyun, and he saw something in her eyes that the others could not see. It was not pride or amusement or cruelty. It was desperation. "Come," she said softly, and only he was close enough to hear the tremor in her voice. "We have much to discuss, young warrior, and very little time." Taehyun looked at Commander Reyes, who could only shake her head helplessly, and then he looked at the princess, whose hands still waited for his. He did not understand why she had chosen him, and he did not know what fate awaited him among the Ethery. But he was a soldier of Earth, and he had sworn an oath to represent humanity with honor wherever he went. He took her hand, and the entire galaxy watched as the youngest human warrior was led away by an alien princess who had just shattered 3,000 years of tradition. No one laughed anymore. They were too busy wondering what the Ethery knew that they did not. The alien princess pointed to the youngest human warrior and said he will be claimed before the entire galaxy, the Ethery flagship Eternal. Dawn was the largest vessel Taehyun had ever seen, and its corridors seemed to stretch on forever in every direction. He had been given quarters that were more luxurious than any home he had ever lived in, but the comfort meant nothing when every Ethery he passed looked at him with open disgust. 3 days had passed since the claiming ceremony, and Princess Valara had not spoken to him once since they boarded her ship. The guards outside his door made it clear that he was not a guest here, and they watched him with the same expression a human might give to an insect that had wandered into their kitchen. "Pathetic creature," one of them muttered as Taehyun walked past, making sure to speak loudly enough for him to hear. "The princess has shamed our entire empire by bringing this animal among us." Taehyun kept walking and said nothing because he had learned in his short military career that some battles were not worth fighting. He thought about his family back on Earth, about his mother who had cried when he told her about joining the military, and about his younger sister Minji, who was studying medicine because he had sent her his entire salary for 3 years. What would they think if they could see him now, trapped on an alien ship where everyone hated him for reasons he did not understand? A servant appeared at his door that evening and told him that the princess had summoned him to her private chambers, and Taehyun felt his heart pound as he followed the guide through winding corridors. The doors to her chambers opened to reveal a room filled with strange plants and soft light, and Princess Valara stood at the center with her back to him. "Leave us," she commanded the servants, and when the doors closed behind them, she finally turned to face him. Her 4 eyes studied him with an intensity that made Taehyun feel like she was reading his very soul, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You must have questions," she said at last, and her voice was softer than it had been at the ceremony. "Only about 1,000, Taehyun admitted, "but I will start with the most important one if you do not mind." "Ask. Why me?" Princess Valara moved to a window that showed the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. and she clasped her hands behind her back. Do you know what the Aetheri are famous for throughout the galaxy? Your technology, Taehan answered. Your wealth and your power, and your empire that has lasted for 10,000 years. Yes, but also something else that we do not speak of to outsiders, she replied. And she turned back to face him with something like fear in her glowing eyes. The royal bloodline carries a gift that has guided our people since before we reached the stars. What kind of gift? Visions, she said simply. We see fragments of the future, pieces of events that have not yet happened, and these visions have saved our empire from destruction more times than your species has existed. Taehan felt a chill run down his spine, even though the room was warm, and he waited for her to continue. 6 months ago, I began having a vision that came to me every night without fail, she explained. And her voice trembled slightly. I saw darkness spreading across the galaxy like a plague. And I saw worlds burning and species dying by the billions. What kind of darkness? An ancient enemy that my people thought we had destroyed long ago, she answered. We called them the Hollow because they are empty of everything except hunger. And they consume the life force of every being they touch. She moved closer to him, and Taehan could see now that she was not just afraid but terrified. In my vision, I saw the Hollow return in numbers we have never faced before, and I saw every defense we built against them fail completely. Then why choose me? Taehan asked with confusion. I am nobody special, and I have never even fought in a real battle before. Because my vision showed me one more thing, Princess Valara said, and she reached out to place her hand on his chest right over his heart. I saw a young human warrior standing between the Hollow and my dying world, and I saw him do something that should have been impossible. What did he do? He made them burn. Taehan stared at her with his mind racing to understand what she was telling him, and he shook his head slowly. Your Highness, I think you have made a terrible mistake, he said honestly. I am just a farmer's son from a small province in Korea, and I only joined the military because my family needed money. The vision does not lie, she insisted. It showed me your face clearly, and it led me directly to you at the ceremony. But I am not a hero, Taehan protested. I do not have special powers or advanced training, and I do not know anything about fighting ancient enemies. Princess Valara smiled for the first time since he had met her, and there was something like hope in her expression. Then you will learn, she said gently. I did not bring you here to fight today or tomorrow, and I brought you here so that you could become the warrior from my vision. And if I cannot, then my world dies, and yours will follow soon after. The weight of her words pressed down on Taehan like a physical force, and he thought about everything he had left behind on Earth. He thought about his mother and his sister, and the green rice fields where he had played as a child. He thought about all the humans who had no idea that an ancient horror was coming to devour them. I do not know if I can be what you need, he said finally, but I will try to become the man from your vision. Relief flooded across her features, and she nodded with gratitude. That is all I ask. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and red emergency lights flashed in the corridor outside. Princess Valara's eyes went wide with shock, and she ran to a console to check the incoming reports. No, she whispered with horror in her voice. This is impossible. What is it? She turned to face him, and all the color had drained from her shifting skin. A Hollow Scout ship has been detected at our border, she said. They were not supposed to return for decades. Taehan felt his blood run cold as he realized what this meant. His training had just run out of time. The alien princess pointed to the youngest human warrior and said he will be claimed before the entire galaxy, the colony world of Setheri. 4 was burning when the Aetheri fleet arrived. And Taehan watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dawn as 3 massive hollow vessels descended through the atmosphere like nightmares made real. 2 million Aetheri civilians lived on this world, and their desperate calls for help filled every communication channel. "Deploy all fighters," Princess Valara commanded, and her voice carried the steel of a leader, even though her hands were shaking. "Get our ground forces to the surface immediately." Taehyun had never seen the Hollow before, and he felt his stomach turn as the tactical displays showed what they really looked like. They were creatures of living shadow, beings that seemed to absorb all light around them, and they moved through the colony streets like a dark flood consuming everything in their path. "The civilians are gathering in shelter complexes across the main city," a tactical officer reported, "but the Hollow are breaking through our defensive lines faster than we can reinforce them." "Send me down there," Taehyun said suddenly, and every Aetheri on the bridge turned to stare at him like he had lost his mind. "Absolutely not," the ship's captain declared with contempt. "You are not trained for this kind of combat, and you would only get in the way of real warriors." "He goes," Princess Valara interrupted, and her tone left no room for argument. "Prepare a shuttle and give him whatever equipment he needs." The captain looked like he wanted to argue, but he simply bowed and issued the orders. 20 minutes later, Taehyun found himself on the surface of an alien world, surrounded by Aetheri soldiers who clearly wished he had stayed on the ship. The sounds of battle echoed from every direction, and screams of terror mixed with the strange shrieking noise that the Hollow made as they attacked. "This way," the squad leader ordered, and they moved through smoke-filled streets toward a shelter complex that had sent out a distress signal. They found the Hollow waiting for them around the next corner. Taehyun watched in horror as the Aetheri soldiers opened fire with their advanced energy weapons, and he saw the beams pass directly through the shadow creatures without causing any visible damage. "They are not solid," the squad leader shouted. "Our weapons cannot hurt them." A hollow creature lunged forward and touched one of the soldiers, and the Aetheri screamed as his body seemed to wither and collapse in seconds. The life had been drained out of him completely. Panic spread through the squad as more soldiers fell, and Taehyun felt fear threatening to freeze him in place. But then he noticed something that the others had missed in their terror. One of the hollow creatures had drifted too close to a burning vehicle, and it had recoiled away from the flames with what sounded almost like a scream of pain. Fire. Taehyun realized with sudden understanding. They are afraid of fire. He looked around desperately and spotted a fuel storage depot near the entrance to the shelter complex, and an idea formed in his mind that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Cover me," he shouted to the surviving soldiers, and he ran toward the depot before anyone could stop him. The Hollow noticed him immediately and began gliding in his direction with terrifying speed. Taehyun reached the depot and found exactly what he was looking for: emergency plasma conduits and portable fuel cells that the colonists used for heating. He grabbed a conduit and connected it to a fuel cell, creating a crude but effective flamethrower that would have made his engineering instructors back on Earth very nervous. A hollow creature reached for him with arms made of pure darkness, and Taehyun squeezed the trigger. A stream of burning plasma erupted from his improvised weapon, and the creature shrieked as flames consumed its shadowy form. It burned, Taehyun realized with fierce joy. It actually burned. "Fireworks against them," he screamed to the Aetheri soldiers. "Find anything that burns and use it." The surviving squad members stared at him for only a moment before they understood, and they scattered to gather whatever fuel and ignition sources they could find. Taehyun led the charge towards the shelter complex, burning every hollow creature that tried to stop him, and the shadow beings retreated before the flames like demons fleeing holy light. They reached the shelter doors and found over 600 civilians trapped inside, mostly families with young children who cried with relief when they saw their rescuers. "We need to get them to the evacuation point," Taehyun said. "Form a perimeter and keep those things back with fire." The Aetheri soldiers followed his orders without question now, and they created a burning corridor through the streets while civilians ran for safety. More hollow creatures came, drawn by the concentration of life force, but they could not pass through the flames. Taehan stood at the rear of the evacuation column, holding back wave after wave of shadow creatures with his plasma flamethrower until his arms burned from the heat and his lungs ached from the smoke. A massive, hollow creature larger than any he had seen before came charging toward him, and Taehan knew that his fuel cell was almost empty. He aimed at the creature's center mass and held the trigger down until the last drop of fuel was gone, and the monster exploded into fragments of burning shadow. But the effort had cost him everything, and Taehan collapsed to his knees as exhaustion and heat exposure took their toll. The world began to go dark around him, and he felt strong hands catching him before he hit the ground. "I have you," Princess Valara's voice said from somewhere far away. "You saved them all, and now let us save you." Taehan tried to respond, but unconsciousness claimed him before he could form the words. When he woke up 3 days later in the medical bay of the Eternal Dawn, he learned that all 600 civilians had survived because of him. The ethery soldiers who had once looked at him with contempt now stood at attention when he passed, and even the ship's captain bowed his head in respect. But the victory was not complete, and the news that Princess Valara brought him made his blood run cold. "The hollow retreated," she explained with fear in her eyes. But before they left, their hive mind sent a message across all of space. What did they say? They called humanity the Burning Ones, and they said they will find your world and consume it first. Taehan closed his eyes and thought about his mother and his sister and everyone he loved on Earth. The ancient enemy was coming for his home, and he had just shown them exactly why they should be afraid. The alien princess pointed to the youngest human warrior and said he will be claimed before the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council chambers fell silent when Taehan finished his testimony, and he looked out at the representatives of 300 species who held the fate of Earth in their hands. He had told them everything about the hollow attack on Setheri 4, about the fire weakness, and about the threat that now targeted his home world. "You are asking us to mobilize the combined fleets of the Galactic Union to defend a single primitive planet," the Croatian ambassador said with barely hidden disdain. "This seems like a very poor use of resources." "The hollow will not stop at Earth," Taehan replied. "They will consume my world and then move on to the next, and then the next after that, until there is nothing left." "Perhaps," the Ven representative acknowledged, "but humanity has been part of our union for only 15 years, and you have contributed very little to our civilization in that time." "We contribute what we can," Taehan answered. "We work hard, and we learn fast, and we never give up." "Admirable qualities for a young species," the Croatian ambassador said with a dismissive wave, "but not enough to justify the cost of this war." The vote was called, and Taehan watched as species after species voted against sending aid to Earth. The great empires saw no value in protecting humanity, and they were willing to let an entire world die rather than risk their own ships and soldiers. When the final count was announced, Taehan felt something inside him go cold and hard. "Then we will defend ourselves," he said quietly, and his voice carried through the chamber despite its soft volume. "Humanity has faced extinction before, and we are still here." He turned and walked out of the chamber without looking back, and Princess Valara followed close behind him. "I am sorry," she said when they were alone. "I thought they would listen after what happened on Setheri 4. "They listened," Taehan replied. "They just did not care." Valara stopped walking and placed her hand on his arm, and her 4 eyes met his with fierce determination. "The Ethori Empire has abandoned you, but I have not," she declared. "I will pledge my personal fleet to Earth's defense, and I will stand beside you no matter what my father says." "Your father, the Emperor?" Taehan asked with surprise. "He will be furious." "He will survive his anger," she said simply. "Your people may not survive without help." Taeyeon looked at this alien princess who had changed his life in ways he never could have imagined, and he felt something warm bloom in his chest. "Thank you," he said softly. "I do not know how to repay this kindness." "Survive," she replied. "That will be payment enough." They returned to Earth together, and Taeyeon stood before the United Nations General Assembly in the same auditorium where world leaders had gathered for over a century. "The galaxy has abandoned us," he told them. "The great powers see us as too small and too weak to matter, and they will not lift a single finger to help us." Murmurs of fear spread through the assembly, and Taeyeon raised his hand for silence. "But humanity has never needed permission to survive," he continued. "We have faced ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions, and we are still here." He looked out at the faces of presidents and prime ministers and kings, and he saw fear but also something else. He saw the same stubborn refusal to give up that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history. "The Hollow are coming for us because they fear what we represent," Taeyeon explained. "We showed them that we can make them burn, and now they want to destroy us before we become too strong to stop. What do you suggest we do?" The Secretary General asked. "We fight," Taeyeon answered simply. "We build every weapon we can. We train every soldier we can spare, and we show the galaxy what humanity is made of." The assembly erupted into debate, but by the end of that long day, every nation on Earth had pledged their support to the defense effort. Factories that had made cars and electronics were converted to produce weapons, and scientists who had studied abstract theories turned their minds to fire-based combat systems. But Earth alone could not produce enough ships or soldiers to face the Hollow Armada, and Taeyeon knew they needed allies. The answer came from the most unexpected place. A Kovali engineering vessel arrived in Earth orbit 3 weeks after the UN address, and their captain asked to speak with the human who had burned the Hollow. "We watched your testimony to the Galactic Council," the Kovali captain explained, "and we saw how the great powers treated you. They treated us like we did not matter," Taeyeon said bitterly. "Yes, just as they have treated us for 2,000 years, the captain replied. "The Corvali are considered too small to be important, but our engineers are the best in the galaxy." "Why are you here?" "Because you showed us something we had forgotten," the captain said with pride in his voice. "You showed us that the small can still fight back." More ships arrived over the following weeks. Vessels from species that the great empires had ignored or dismissed for centuries. The Minari sent their fastest pilots, beings of light and energy who could fly circles around any other species in space. The Dreth sent their fiercest infantry, warriors from a heavy-gravity world whose strength rivaled the mighty Crocian. The Talani sent their best doctors and healers, and the Vorsk contributed their advanced sensor technology. The forgotten species of the galaxy had heard humanity's defiant words, and they had decided to stand together against the darkness. Taeyeon worked beside Valara day and night, coordinating the defense and planning strategies with their new allies. He noticed how she always seemed to be near him, how her eyes would find his across crowded rooms, and how her hand would brush against his when they studied tactical displays. "You should rest," she told him one night when they were alone on the command deck. "The battle will come soon, and you need your strength." "So should you," he replied. "But I do not see you sleeping either." She smiled, and her skin shifted to soft shades of pink and gold that he had learned meant happiness. "I sleep better when you are nearby," she admitted quietly. "Your presence gives me peace." Taeyeon felt his heart beat faster, and he reached out to take her hand in his. "When this is over," he began, but alarms cut off his words before he could finish. Contact at the edge of the solar system. A sensor officer reported with fear in her voice. "Over 1,000 hollow vessels, and they are heading directly for Earth." Valara squeezed his hand tightly, and Taeyeon looked out at the stars where death was approaching. "Then let us show them what the Forgotten can do," he said grimly. The final battle for Earth had begun. The alien princess pointed to the youngest human warrior and said he will be claimed before the entire galaxy. Earth's defensive fleet numbered just over 200 ships, and they faced more than 1,000 hollow vessels that blotted out the stars like a spreading plague of darkness. Taehan watched from the command ship as the battle began, and he felt his heart breaking with every friendly vessel that fell to the enemy. The Minari pilots danced through space with incredible skill, drawing hollow fighters away from the main fleet while human ships unleashed torrents of fire-based weapons. The Dreth warriors roared battle cries as they boarded enemy vessels, their heavy world strength allowing them to tear through hollow creatures with thermal blades. But for every enemy they destroyed, 3 more seemed to take its place. "We are losing ground," Valara reported from her tactical station. "The Hollow are pushing through our outer defenses." "Hold the line," Taehan ordered. "We only need to hold them long enough for the evacuation ships to clear the planet." Millions of humans were fleeing Earth in transport vessels, heading for shelter on Mars and the outer colonies where they might survive if the battle was lost. But Taehan had no intention of losing. "Your Highness," a sensor officer called out suddenly, "we are detecting a massive energy signature descending toward the Korean peninsula." Taehan's blood ran cold as he understood what this meant. "Show me," he demanded. The display revealed a hollow command entity, a creature the size of a building that served as an anchor for the hive mind in this region of space. If they destroyed it, the hollow fleet would lose coordination and might fall into chaos. But it had landed in Seoul, the city where his mother and sister still lived because the evacuation had not reached them yet. "I am going down there," Taehan announced. "That is suicide," the Korvali captain protested. "No small team can defeat a command entity." "I do not need to defeat it," Taehan replied. "I just need to reach it and plant a thermal charge at its core." Valara grabbed his arm and spun him around to face her, and her eyes burned with fear and desperation. "If you do this, you may not survive." "If I do not do this, none of us will survive," he answered gently. "This is why you chose me, and this is what I was meant to do." She stared at him for a long moment, and then she pulled him close and pressed her forehead against his. "Then I am coming with you." "No, I need you here to command the fleet. The fleet can survive without me," she interrupted fiercely. "I cannot survive without you." They took a shuttle down to the surface with a squad of human soldiers, Aethery guards, and Dreth warriors who refused to let them go alone. Seoul was burning when they landed, and hollow creatures swarmed through the streets in numbers that made Taehan's heart sink. The command entity towered over the city like a mountain of living shadow, and its presence seemed to drain the light from the very air. "Move fast and stay close," Taehan ordered. "We cannot fight through all of them, so we need to reach the entity before they realize what we are doing." They fought their way through the nightmare streets, using flame weapons to clear a path through the horde of shadow creatures. One by one, the members of their squad fell to protect them, Dreth warriors holding back waves of enemies while human soldiers sacrificed themselves to buy precious seconds. By the time they reached the base of the command entity, only Taehan and Valara remained. "Get clear," Taehan told her as he armed the massive thermal charge he had been carrying. "When this goes off, there will not be anything left." "I am not leaving you." "You have to live," he insisted. "The galaxy needs you to lead the Alliance when this is over." "I do not care about the galaxy," she cried, and tears of silver light streamed down her shifting face. "I care about you." Taehan cupped her face in his hands and looked into her 4 beautiful eyes. "I know," he whispered. "I care about you too, and that is why I need you to survive." He kissed her then, a brief and desperate kiss that held everything he could not say with words. Then he pushed her away and ran toward the command entity before she could stop him. The creature sensed him coming and reached out with arms of pure darkness, and a voice echoed in his mind like thunder. Little burning one, it spoke. You cannot destroy me, and your fire is nothing against my power. Maybe, Taehan admitted as he climbed higher into the creature's form, but I only need to get close enough. Surrender, and I will make your death painless. Humanity does not surrender, Taehan snarled. We never have and we never will. He reached the core of the entity and activated the thermal charge, and for one perfect moment, he felt completely at peace. He had done what Valara's vision had shown. He had become the man who would stand between darkness and the world. The explosion was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire that rose into the sky and burned away the command entity completely. The hollow fleet faltered and broke as their hive mind lost its anchor, and the allied forces tore through them with renewed fury. Valara ran toward the blast site with her heart shattered into a million pieces, screaming his name into the smoke and fire. She found him in the rubble, burned and broken, but somehow still breathing. Medical teams now, she commanded through her communicator. He is alive, and he needs help immediately. The battle was won by the time the doctors stabilized him, and the surviving hollow vessels fled into the darkness of space. Earth had survived, and humanity had proven their worth to the entire galaxy. Taehan woke up 3 weeks later to find Valara holding his hand, and she had not left his bedside since they brought him out of the rubble. The galaxy wants to honor you, she told him softly. They want to call you a hero. I was just doing my job, he replied with a weak smile. She smiled back, and her skin shifted through colors of joy and love that he had never seen before. There is one more thing, she said. I need to formally release my claim on you. What? She stood and walked to a view screen that showed the Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, where representatives from hundreds of species had gathered once again. Watch, she said. Taehan saw Princess Valara standing before the same assembly where she had first claimed him, and her voice rang out clear and strong. I release my claim on this human warrior, she announced, but I offer him something else instead. She turned to face a camera that projected her image across the galaxy. I offer him my hand in marriage, as equal to equal, and I ask him to stand beside me not as a champion, but as a partner. The assembly erupted into chaos, but Valara ignored them all and looked directly at Taehan through the screen. What do you say? She asked. Taehan laughed, and it hurt his healing ribs, but he did not care. You claimed me once, he said softly. Now I claim you back. The galaxy watched as a human farmer's son accepted the proposal of an alien princess, and for the first time in history, the stars did not seem quite so far away. The end.